Welcome back to Nailing It Down with Cedric Varn over here at Varnwalk. We are continuing our series on the critique of the Gotha program. We are now on part 4. It'll still be a briefer episode because part 4 only deals with one section, one line of the Gotha program itself. And while it's a pretty big set of arguments, it's not one that people tend to focus on as much because it's pretty clear what Marx is aiming at, and it's not super long. So let's just look at the actual text. This is from the Marxist in our archive version on Marxist.org. Excuse me. Starting from these basic principles, the German Workers' Party strives by all legal means for a free state and a socialist society. The abolition of wage system, together with the iron law of wages and exploitation in every form, the elimination of all social and political inequity. I shall return to the free state later. So, in the future, the German Workers' Party has got to believe in Lassalle's iron law of wages. Now, I'm going to explain the iron law of wages to you. The iron law of wages is a theory that was named by Ferdinand Lassalle. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels attribute the doctrine to Lassalle, but Lassalle seems to have gotten it from a mixture of Goethe and Thomas Malthus. It was coined in reference to David Ricardo's law of rent and the competing theories of population by Thomas Malthus. Lassalle seems to think that it is an iron and cruel law, that wages cannot fall below subsistence level, because without subsistence, laborers will be unable to work, but competition amongst laborers for employment will drive wages down to a minimum level. This actually is one of the same beliefs that leads to the tendency of the rate of profits to fall. You'll now see why Marx says it's a tendency of the rate of profits to fall and not a law of the rate of profits to fall. And the reason why he says it's a tendency is because its logic is actually the same as the iron law of wages. And in fact, driving down of profits for wages on the market, which following a Malthusian logic, Lassalle sees as inevitable, Marx agrees with as a general tendency, but disagrees with Lassalle that it is an inevitable, that it's not an iron law. Ricardo complicates this, and Marx sides with Ricardo. Ricardo says as long as there's new investment in technology or other means of increasing the demand for labor faster than the population growth, it offsets to the Malthusian calculus, and this will also apply for the wage rate. Marx then criticizes the Malthusian basis for the iron law of wages and criticizes Lassalle for misunderstanding David Ricardo. So it's important to note where Marx is coming from here. Back to the text. This may not be lost. The nonsense is perpetuated speaking of the abolition of the wage system. It should read system of wage labor, together with the iron law of wages. If I abolish wage labor, then naturally I abolish its laws also, whether they are iron or a sponge. I love Marx when he's snarky. But Lassalle's attack on wage labor turns out to be solely on this so-called law. So this is actually important. By the way, this is another reason why when people say that the wage system will continue with free currency like capitalism in lower phases of socialism, they're sticking to the first section of Critique of the Gotha program and not explicitly not dealing with with section 2 here. And it's clear why as you read this, because people who we can justify the Chinese market system based off of Critique of the Gotha program, it's kind of hard to do when you read this. It is well known that nothing of the iron law of wages is Lassalle's except for the word iron, which is borrowed from Goethe's great eternal iron laws. The word iron is labeled by which the true believers recognize one another. If I take the law with Lassalle's stamp on it, and consequently in his sense, then I must also take his substantiation for it. And what is that? As Lang showed, shortly after Lassalle's death and his Malthusian theory of population, preached by Lang himself, it is if this theory is correct, then I cannot abolish law even if I abolish wage labor 100 times over, because the law governs not only the system of wage labor, but every social system. Basically, Marx is saying, like, if this is a law the way that Malthusian population would be a law, then there's no way to fix it just by abolishing wages, because the social system of population, increase and decrease is going to be a problem. Basing themselves directly on this, economists have been proving for 50 years or more that socialism cannot abolish poverty, which has its basis in nature, but it can only make it general, distribute simultaneously over the whole surface of society. By the way, Marx anticipates the common ruin of all, our race to the bottom theory of socialism pushed by conservatives, of which Marx mentions in this piece. There's so many things that people think Marx pushes for that he doesn't. Once you read this thing. But this is not the main thing. Quite apart from the false Lassallean formulation of the law, the truly outrageous retrogression consists in the following. Since Lassalle's death, there has been asserted in our party that the scientific understanding that wages are not what they appear to be, namely, value or price of labor, but only a mass form for the value or price of labor power. This is a really big deal in later forms of capital, and particularly in Capital Volume 1. The labor power distinction is really important. Thereby, the whole bourgeois conception of wages hitherto, as well as all criticisms hitherto directed against this conception, was thrown overboard once and for all. It was made clear that the wage worker has permission to work for his own subsistence, that is, to live, only insofar as he works for a certain time gratis for the capitalist, and hence also the latter's co-consumers of surplus value. That the whole capitalist system of production turns on an increase of the gratis labor by extending the workday or by developing productivity, that is, by increasing the intensity or labor power, etc., what we might call workers' productivity. The system of wage labor is a system of slavery, and indeed of a slavery which becomes more severe in proportion to the social productive forces of labor developed, whether the worker receives the better or worse payment. And after this has gained more and more ground in our party, some return to Lassalle's dogma, although they must have known that Lassalle did not know what wages were, but, following in the wake of the bourgeois economists, took their appearance for the essence of the matter. It is as if, among slaves who at last got behind a secret of slavery and broke out in rebellion, a slave still enthralled to the obsolete notions which were ascribed on the program of the rebellion. Slavery must be abolished because the feeding of slaves in the system of slavery cannot exceed such a low maximum. Does not the mere fact of the representation of our party were capable of penetrating such a monstrous attack on the understanding that has spread amongst the masses of our party prove by itself what criminal levity and what lack of conscience they set to work in drawing up this compromise program? When people like Lars Lee try to soften this, they have to ignore how strong this is worded. Instead of the indefinite concluding of the phrase, the elimination of all social and political inequity, it ought to have said the abolition of class distinctions, all social and political inequity arise from them would disappear of itself. We don't need to get rid of social and political inequity. If you don't have class, this is irrelevant in the first place. Now, there's a lot to be made here, but basically what Marx is saying is labor power can be messed with, not just so you can change the amount of, it's not just that workers give the same amount of labor power in the transaction. Sometimes workers give more, sometimes they give less, sometimes it can be leveraged better by machinery, etc. Which means that it's not just workers in total that's the issue, which is why Malthusian calculus doesn't explain it all here, and that Ricardo answers that anyway. So there we go. And here we are. This comes back up again in Capital Volume 1, Chapter 25, the General Law of Capitalist Accumulation, by the way, if you want to see where more of this goes to. And then it comes up a third time in Theories of Surplus Value, Part 1, Chapter 2. So go check those out. I'll leave them in the show notes for you. I hope you have a great day. Like and subscribe. I'd like to thank new Con Ilka Harrington patrons. That's the $10 patrons over here at Barnblog. I've gotten a few more lately, and I would like to thank them for their support. That includes Lau, Christopher E, and Adam B. Thank you so much for your support. We have many tiers available if you want to be a patron, and many kinds of shows coming up. So I hope you enjoy them. And share alike. Have a great